A pleasant day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wendhilyn Camposo. I am a second year student of the course Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English. And today, we will talk about the goddess Artemis and many more information about the goddess, especially her love life. And without further ado, let's proceed to the discussion. Let us start with the main question. Who is Artemis? Artemis came from a powerful family. Her father was Zeus, the king of the gods. Her mother, Leto, was a titan. Apollo, the god of music, was her twin brother. She is the goddess of the wild animals, the hunt, and visitation of chastity and childbirth. She was the goddess, and the moon often depicted with her trusty bow and arrow and a short tunic to aid in running through the woods. Her maidenly virtue is for she swore never to marry, was presented in counterpoint to the passionate and fiery Aphrodite. Artemis was the oldest twin born to Zeus and Leto. The ancient believes that as soon as she was born, she assisted her mother in bringing her brother Apollo into the world. This story gave her a position as the goddess of childbirth. Yet, Artemis' most prominent characterization was as a virginal goddess. Now let's talk about the birth of Artemis. Upon hearing of Zeus' extramarital relationship with Leto, Hera set out to prevent the birth of Leto's children. When Leto became pregnant by Zeus, Hera put a curse on her not to be able to find solid ground or an island on the earth to give birth to her children. Leto wandered all of Greece in labor and pain, looking for a suitable place to give birth. Zeus emerged a floating island from the sea, anchored to the bottom of the Aegean to give it stability. The island was not anchored into the mainland and therefore did not challenge Hera's decree. Once she entered into labor, Leto managed to find her way to the island of Delos. On Delos, Leto gave birth to her twins, first Artemis and then Apollo. Leto was one of Zeus' mistresses and Hera was extremely jealous. How was Artemis usually pictured? Artemis is generally pictured as a young girl wearing a knee-length tunic and armed with her bow and arrow. She often is shown accompanied by forest creatures such as deer and bears. When traveling, Artemis rides a chariot pulled by 4 silver stags. What about the attributes of Artemis? Chastity was one of Artemis' most well-known attributes, and as a virgin huntress, she was the protector of young girls and women. In addition, she was known by many names and titles related to her divine functions. She was called Agregoteri of the hunt, Feria of the beast, Arciclochia helper in childbirth, and Aidios Partidos, most revered virgin. Like her brother, Artemis too possessed the power to bring disease upon the mortal world and remove it once her wrath had been sated. How about the special powers and skills that Artemis had? Like all the Greek Olympic gods, Artemis was immortal and very powerful. Her special powers included perfect aim with a bow and arrow, the ability to turn herself and others into animals, healing, disease, and control of nature. Did you know that Artemis has 6 wishes? When Artemis turned 3 years old, she asked her father Zeus for 6 wishes, and those are to never get married, to have more names than her brother Apollo, to have a bow and arrows made by the Cyclops, and a knee-length hunting tunic to wear, to bring light to the world, to have 60 nymphs for friends who will tend to her haunts, and to have all the mountains as her domain. Zeus couldn't resist her little girl and granted her all her wishes. Now let us know the interesting facts about the Greek goddess Artemis. Did you know that when Queen Niobe mocked her mother Leto for only having 2 children, Artemis and Apollo took their revenge by killing all 14 of Niobe's children. Despite not having any kids of her own, she was often considered the goddess of childbirth. She was the protector of young girls until they became married. One of the largest temples built to a Greek god or goddesses was the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. It was so impressive that it was named one of the 7 ancient wonders of the ancient world. Did you know that there is a myth about Artemis and her father, Zeus? There are not many myths about Artemis' childhood, unlike Apollo. There is, however, a hymn by Callimachus from 305 BCE to 240 BCE which illustrates the young goddess' relationship with her father Zeus. In the hymn, the Greek goddess asked Zeus to let her keep her maidenhood forever and be known by many names. Now, let's talk about Artemis' story about fighting with giants. One Greek myth tells the story of 2 huge giants brothers called the Allidae giants. These brothers grow very large and powerful, so powerful that even the gods began to fear them. Artemis discovered that they could only be killed by each other. She disguised herself as a deer and jumped between the brothers while they were hunting. They both threw their spears at Artemis, but she dodged the spears just in time. The brothers ended up striking and killing each other with their spears. Now let's move forward to the love story of Artemis. Some of you may be thinking that a love story featuring Artemis sounds a bit odd because she doesn't have much interaction with anyone outside of her close followers and the wildlife of her forest. Most male interaction doesn't end too well. There are other stories where minor deities pursued Artemis, but these all ended in rejection. And for those who couldn't take no as an answer, the consequences were a tad more severe. When Artemis had rejected the river god Alpheus, he decided to kidnap her anyway. When Artemis then found out that Alpheus' plan, she covered her face in the mud. When Alpheus came to collect his new bride, he walked past Artemis because he didn't recognize her. Artemis was then able to escape unharmed while still giving herself one of those fancy mud facials at the same time. Now let's focus on the story of Orion and Artemis. High in the heavens, Orion had a secret admirer, and that is Artemis, the goddess of the moon and the daughter of Zeus, king of the gods. It was her job to guide a team of flying horses hitched to a cart that carried the moon. Night after night, the winged horses pulled the moon and Artemis from east to west across the sky. When clouds weren't blocking her view, Artemis gazed down on Orion as he roamed around his deserted island, and she fell in love with him. But there was a problem. The gods could not mingle with the mortals. Artemis knew this but couldn't resist. One night, as she was guiding the moon, she gave into temptation. She halted her horses, sprouted divine wings, and soared down to Orion's side. It was love at first sight for the hunter. From then on, Artemis made a habit of stalling her cart over Orion's island and flying down to hunt and play with her mere mortal. Life was great for the happy couple until Apollo, god of the sun and Artemis' brother, discovered the pair and reported what he had seen to Zeus. The king of the gods was enraged and acted immediately to squelch the unlawful love affair. He ordered Apollo to take a giant scorpion to the island. Apollo delivered the deadly beast during the day, when Orion was sleeping, knowing one bite would kill the hunter. But it didn't work quite out the way. Orion awoke in the time to fight the scorpion. The battle lasted for hours, but the scorpion finally managed a deadly bite, and the mighty hunter perished. Artemis discovered her slain lover and was filled with grief and anger. The giant scorpion, wounded after the battle, was crawling away from his prey. Artemis instantly knew what had happened. She grabbed the scorpion and flung it to the sky, where it was transformed into the constellation Scorpius. Then, Artemis lovingly placed the body of Orion in the opposite side of the sky. where it too became a constellation. Artemis made sure that the scorpion and the hunter were as far apart as possible. That is why, when we see Orion rising in the east in the winter, we see Scorpius beating a retreat in the west. In other version of the stories told, Orion was one of Artemis' best friends. The two friends loved to hunt together. However, one day, Orion boasted to Artemis that he could kill every creature on Earth. The goddess Zea, Mother Earth, heard the boast and sent a scorpion to kill Orion. In some Greek stories, it is actually Artemis who ends up killing Orion. And that is the life of Artemis and the tragic story of her love life with Orion. And that would be all. I hope you learned something from my video and see you on my next one. Bye!